All right, this story, Life's Little Stories, episode 4. This is about Patrick Swayze and the Falcon. Now, this story is funny because this was December of 2003. I was transferring from my first ship. After 6.5 years on one ship, I finally got orders to go somewhere. And I was like, okay, let's go somewhere. And I got orders to go to Bangor, Washington, the sub base. I said, sure, let's do it. What made it funny though was when I was checking out, this our ship's officer, I don't remember his name either, but what was funny about him was he looked like he had Patrick Swayze's face, but he looked like the Blue Falcon from the Muppets. And you'll see the picture. I posted the picture here on my video so you can see what he looks like. Well, every day during that whole deployment, every time we pulled into somewhere, I think it was the first place we pulled into was Thailand. And I remember he was the first one at the brow, which is the entrance and exit of the ship. He had a big old basket full of condoms, and he kept telling people, use it, make water balloons, I don't care, use it, better be safe than sorry. And we're all sitting there going like, what's he talking about? And every time before we pulled into a port, he had these PSA videos he would talk to us about where he would say, oh, so we're pulling into Thailand and you meet a girl. Good for you. When you come back, and he pulls out this big needle and he says, this is the needle that I'm going to stick in you when you start complaining how it hurts everywhere. And you didn't listen because you didn't want to use protection. So enjoy. And that's why he'd be at the pier with with all that stuff. And we sitting there going like, is he serious? But now this was when I was transferring that day. I had to go to all the departments to get the signature saying, I'm leaving the ship. I'm going to shore duty. And at the time I was pretty heavy. I was pretty big. And he said it. And every morning it was funny because I guess he'd stand at the sick call trying to see who tried to get out of working the day because they're mad. They're either sick, hungover, or something. And it was funny because I didn't know he was a kidney survivor. So he had one kidney because he smoked a lot back in the day. But oh well. Well, the thing about this guy was he was third in command on the ship. So if the CO died, XO died, he'd be the next guy in charge. So he knew he had leverage and power where he didn't care what anyone said to him because he's like, I don't care. I'm the next guy in line. But he was a good guy. He wasn't like this big overweight dude. He was like this stocky, skinny built, tall, 6 foot guy. And he told us, and while I was in line, I remember the first person in the line, he's like, why are you here? And the person was like, oh, I don't feel good. He goes, do you smoke? He goes, yeah. He goes, that's why you're sick. Then the next person was some girl. I guess she was having cramps that day or something. He goes, do you smoke? She goes, yes. That's why. And he always kept saying that to people, and it was funny. Then when he got to me, it was even more funnier because when he got to me, he looks at me and goes, what do you want? I go, sir, I'm transferring. I need a signature from medical saying that you guys are good. He goes, okay. And he looks at the paper, then he looks at me and he goes, you know what they have in shore duty? I said, no, sir. He goes, they have gyms. You should go use one because you look like a big tomato. I want to pop you like a pimple. And of course, I looked at him. Can't say, F you. What'd you say to me? I looked and smiled at him and I said, thank you for those kind words, sir. And he signed it. But what was funny was during that whole deployment, he always said all these funny things and these one-liners. He was dead serious. And I sat there, I was like, this guy has power. No one could ever tell him anything other. But that was the guy. He was funny. And I remember we were in Singapore. I remember we were in Singapore. And when we go to Singapore, you can't pull into a port because there's nowhere to pull, and plus this thing about being a nuclear reactor, they don't want you near it. So you anchor out about 60 miles away in these little tugboats, like the tugboats you see in that Bloodsport movie. Those are our modes of transportation. And I remember people would get so sick just using using those things before you got to land. I didn't puke, thank God. I was okay. But I remember we anchored out, and the little boat took us to this little bar where that was the meeting. And it was funny because that bar had like a tent to the side, and all these people were on IVs and everything. I'm thinking, these must be all the drunks. And I see him standing there just looking at everyone. He's making that face like he wants to say, weak, weak, you're all weak. But it's just funny how that was and stuff. And I always laughed and go, wow, this guy was a genius. I gave him eye to eye sometimes, and I was like, I wonder if he thinks what I'm thinking. But the whole deployment there was just funny because he just it wasn't it wasn't really a deployment though. That's the funny thing. What led to that a year before I transferred was I had met my ex-wife. I had met her. It was 2 weeks before we went out to sea, and I was like, "What the hell?" Then we went on an emergency. It was not called a deployment. It was more like we were gone for like 11 months because we the Kitty Hawk at the time was always breaking down. So the Kitty Hawk broke down, and I remember the rear admiral who's in charge of that fleet, which they called Fifth Fleet, that's in charge of all the Asian areas. He came on board and oh, he said, thank you guys for taking the watch over for them. And I'm thinking, I didn't agree to this, and it was so funny. We were gone for 11 months, but it was okay because when we got to Korea, it was like our ninth month gone, and I remember in Korea before we even pulled in that morning, it was like 6 o'clock. I remember it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and he comes on our captain comes on the speaker and he goes, "Gentlemen, ladies, we're going home." And I remember I never seen so many people on the ship. Everyone screamed and yelled like, "Yes, we're finally going home! Finally!" We were all so happy to go home. And then we pulled into Korea, but we anchored out again. And it was funny because when we anchored out, we would anchor out in a city called Busan. And I sit there, I go, I've been going there 7 times in my whole career, but no one really knew what that place was because it's like a fishing town. But it wasn't until that movie Train to Busan came out. Now everybody's like, I want to go to Busan, which was funny. Came back home. I transferred, got to be on shore duty for 3 years, got to watch my daughter be born. It was nice being away from the Navy. The only funny thing about it, though, was when I went back to my new ship in 2007, this chief asked me, "Oh, so what did you do for shore duty?" And I said, "I'm added to my family and so and so. I didn't go to school or nothing." And he said, "Well, you wasted those 3 years." I wanted to punch him in the face and say, "Whatever, dude. I'm not a lifer like you." And that was it. Great story. It's a short story what I tell you about, but until the next time, have a good day, everybody.